Hello, my friends, and welcome to another episode of the JD Rucker Show. I'm your host, JD Rucker, and it's probably the last time you're ever going to hear that, unless you listen to my archives. I've been struggling almost every show to be able to get in all the stories, and so time is clearly at a premium until they give me a 3-hour or 4-hour or 5-hour block. Trying to squeeze everything into this 2-hour show is going to be a challenge, so I'm just going to bypass the early introductions. I'll mention my sponsor, and then we'll get straight into the stories going forward. That's the plan, because, like I said, time is super valuable, and we cannot waste it with me talking about, hey, yesterday I went to go do this or whatever. Fewer stories about life and more stories that are actually pertinent to your life, to the lives of Americans, and to the lives of people across the country. So less chit chat, but I do have to mention our sponsors because, hey, look, we couldn't have the show without them. Later on today, we're going to be, or later on in the show, I'll be playing an interview that I did yesterday with Jonathan Rose, co-founder of Genesis Gold Group, who happens to be one of my primary sponsor. They're really the reason this show is even possible. And so I encourage you to check them out at Protect Wealth Now. Sorry, it's not just later. ProtectWealthNow.com. Check out Genesis Gold Group. They are very different from other gold companies. You won't hear them trying to sell you $5,000 or $10,000 in free silver in exchange for. It blows my mind that still works, but apparently it does. So let's check them out. ProtectWealthNow.com. Let's go ahead and dive into this first story. Oopsie, wrong one. There we go. Much better. So this comes from Brandon Smith, one of the most, I would say, intellectually sound people out there. I don't agree with nearly everything that he says. I mean, he posts some things that are just way out there as far as, reality. But that's about, 3%, maybe 5% of what he posts. The other 95% or more is absolutely positively spot on, and it's a shame that his website alt-market.us doesn't get more traffic than the vast majority of these conservative and even alternative media sites that don't do nearly as much awesome content as he does. His is really strong. But today we're talking about something that I've talked about quite a bit. Nobody else seems to talk about it. That's the part that gets to me, is that I can't get I've even mentioned it to other show hosts saying, hey, you should really check out the Council for Inclusive Capitalism. We've all heard of the WEF, the World Economic Forum. We've all heard of the World Health Organization and the United Nations and all these various globalist entities, the open societies. We have George Soros, and we've all heard of Klaus Schwab. But it's strange that nobody talks about the Council for Inclusive Capitalism, which to me is the tip of the spear for the Globalist Elite Cabal. Think of it, if the World Economic Forum, if they're sort of like the think tank / recruiting arm for the globalists, right? They have their big conference in Davos. They get all the bad guys together, as many people as they can. They try to convert people into bad guys. They bring in, semi-good guys, or at least malleable good guys, and try to bring them over to the dark side. They push climate change. They push AI. They push transhumanism and transgenderism and everything else. Okay, that's their big push. But for the most part, they're a think tank. Okay, for the most part, their goal is to recruit, and as Klaus Schwab has said, to infiltrate governments. He injects people into there, and they're pushing for control. But the Council for Inclusive Capitalism, they're the tip of the spear. They're the ones that actually get stuff done. And the sad part is that they do it in the guise of being sort of like a more of a think tank, but they don't. This is the action arm of the Globalist Elite Cabal. And that's why it shocks me that so few in our industry, so few in alternative media, conservative media, fringe media, whatever you want to call it, nobody's talking about it. I've written many articles and done several shows about him. Brandon Smith has as well. And it's funny, I actually end up posting these articles. I'll post this article, I'm sure, over at discernreport.com. But uh, outside of him and maybe a couple of others that I don't know, nobody's talking about these guys, and you need to. And I'll start right off the bat. This should catch your attention with the very first word in the article: Rothschild. Rothschild. That's, hey, conspiracy theory, tinfoil hats should already be getting put on right now. Title of the article is Rothschild Wants Merger Between Corporations, Governments, and AI to quote unquote save capitalism. And of course, they want to kill capitalism and replace it with shareholder capitalism, inclusive capitalism, which is not capitalism, it's Marxism that's hidden under the guise of capitalism. So pay attention to the show today, folks. This is really good stuff. Good as in we need to know the information, not good as in, hey, hooray, they're trying to kill us all. All right. According to the article, if you're not familiar with a little organization called the Council for Inclusive Capitalism, don't worry, most people have never heard of it. The group was formed at the height of the COVID pandemic, which is technically not true. They were started in 2017, but they rose in prominence during COVID. So I get the point there. As fear instilled by government officials and the media propagated the news feeds, the majority of the public was rather distracted. The CIC is essentially everything that conspiracy theorists have been warning about for years, packaged into a single Orwellian entity, complete with dramatic piano music and a mask of humanitarian philanthropy. Oh, that is so true. I'm going to play at least part of this video. This is actually from the Council for Inclusive Capitalism. And before I play that, it's important to note, these guys, whereas the World Economic Forum, they've come out of the shadows in recent years. They were kind of sort of hidden, but really since the Obama years, they've injected themselves more into conversations. They've really tried to establish a greater foothold than just operating from the shadows. They've come out and flat out said, you will eat the bugs. They've come out and flat out said, you will not drive the cars. We will kill the cows. I mean, they've talked about their depopulation and control agenda openly. Whereas, and this should raise your alarm bells, whereas the Council for Inclusive Capitalism has not. They've gone so far as to have their Wikipedia pages removed. There is no mention of the Council for Inclusive Capitalism in Wikipedia, despite the fact that the names behind them, which do include, led by a Rothschild, they're funded by the Rockefeller Foundation. They work directly with the Vatican. This is not a little organization. So let's go ahead and play this video.
È necessario e urgente un sistema economico giusto, affidabile e in grado di rispondere alle sfide più radicali che l'umanità e il pianeta si trovano ad affrontare.
We are answering Pope Francis's challenge to create more inclusive economies that spread the benefits of capitalism more equitably and allow individuals to realize their full potential.
A majority of people around the world say that they think their families will be worse off in 5 years. That's a scenario that we simply can't accept.
Too much wealth has accreted to too few people.
If you make money, what's the point if you're not prepared to share it? If the people who help make that wealth for you can't live with dignity?
It's inclusive capitalism, though, and we have to recognize that starting from where we are to where we need to get to, we need to bring everyone along, and there will be adjustments that come with that.
We do need the private sector's ingenuity, capital, technology, people, everything, their passion to come to the party.
We want to operate in a sustainable way, where incentives are aligned across generations, not just across quarters, and the main actors take a long-term perspective.
Aligning our innovation with the UN Sustainable Development Goals and the priorities of inclusive capitalism is both a business and sustainability imperative.
Two reasons, I think, why I'd say concrete commitments to inclusive capitalism matter. I mean, the first, and not to be underestimated, really important, is they can inspire other people. And the second thing that I would say around concrete public commitments is they can help build trust.
Leaders in the business community can be a unifying force. They can be a source of opportunity. They can be a source of understanding. So we as business leaders can step up and solve many of these economic problems.
I think business plays a very important role in resolving these challenges. I think businesses have to become, part of the solution through leadership by example and through leadership by incentives.
We are stewards of this earth. It's our duty to keep it clean and to keep it decent for future generations.
I'm wanting to embark on this journey to provide the guidance and the assistance of the church's own social thought and whatever other consideration might be necessary, whether ethical or, just social guidance, so that this group that has, taken up such a noble task of making capitalism work for the good of humanity, achieve its goal and land on target. So this is our vision, this is our purpose.
Look, the fact that different religions need to come together on all matters is just the crying need of the times in our world. Faith cannot be used to pull us apart. Faith is meant to bring us together. And the fact that I'm a Sikh and somebody else is a different religion, to me, doesn't matter.
Our work is indeed about social justice, which is rooted in the gospel. The idea that every person deserves to live in a just society.
Capitalism is at the heart of innovation that creates higher standard of living. And we know that it's been working, yet we also know we can do a lot better.
We need a new system focused on the well-being of people. It's a big challenge, but if it is done right, the benefits will be immense.
It's not just an asset owner, it's not just an asset manager, it's not just a CEO, it's not just these boards of directors. We have to work collectively over the long term.
What I think capitalism has to stand for to be inclusive capitalism, how we help everybody have equal access to the opportunity, have the economic mobility.
The Council is a terrific body in which we can assemble a critical mass of companies to join and commit to concrete actions that not only affect and improve the communities in which we live, but affect the world community of which we're all a part of.
We believe we need more than 1,000 organizations on board, and only with this very purposeful collective action, we will see the systemic change across markets that will make capitalism truly inclusive.
We invite all businesses, large and small, and individuals to join us as stewards for inclusive capitalism by going to our website, agreeing the principles, and making your own commitments to inclusive capitalism. Please join us. Thank you.
Wow. If you hadn't seen that before, and I've seen it now 3 or 4 times over the last 3 years, if you hadn't seen that before, hopefully that will wake you up. If you are versed or educated at all in the language utilized by the Globalist Elite Cabal, then again, this should be absolutely, positively eye-opening. Okay? You notice, obviously, they start with what is the Rothschild lady? I forgot her first name. Something Lynn. I always forget her first name. Anybody with 4 names, I just don't have the memory to be able to remember four names on a person. But anyway, starts off with her and the Pope. The Pope. And sometimes people say, "Oh, you rip on the Pope a lot. Are you anti-Catholic?" I'm not anti-Catholic at all. I don't think that Pope Francis represents the Catholic Church properly. At least the maybe he represents the Church, but he doesn't represent Catholics. His woke ideology is definitely not what you would expect from the leader of the Catholic Church, and they brought in other members of other religions, always talking about how religion shouldn't get in the way of this, inclusiveness. It's all about inclusiveness. Hopefully you noticed there were some of the other standard financial, economic bad guys in there, the CEO of State Street. This type of language, this type of manipulation, talking about the environment, talking about exclusivity, talking about stakeholder capitalism without actually mentioning the word stakeholder capitalism, this is them. Okay? If you don't like the World Economic Forum, great. These guys are the bigger threat. Let's get back to the article. The basic root function of the council is to centralize most or all major corporations. Okay? The corporations with global influence, and join them with governments into a network that places ideology over profit motive. Some people might argue that corporations need to adopt a shared value system instead of simply roaming around like sharks devouring whatever they can sink their teeth into. But who gets to choose the set of values that corporate behemoths follow? As I've talked about many times, this is their push is to establish ubiquitous public-private partnerships. They want every industry and every government and the leaders in both to be consolidated and focusing on problems. Just as an example, when we're talking about energy is going to be operated by the oil companies. You might say, oh, how could that possibly be? The oil companies, they're the enemy. You got the weirdos gluing themselves to streets from Stop Oil. So why would the oil companies have already been pegged by the Globalist Elite Cabal to be the ones that usher in the next chapter, usher in the green agenda, the climate change hoax agenda. So of course they're going to be included. Of course they're going to be tied in with government through public-private partnerships, and they will be the ones making the decisions about inclusivity when it comes to energy. About saying, hey, yeah, we might be the big oil company, but even we're willing to say that we can't have any more gas cars on the road after 2030 or 2035 or 2040 or whatever it is, whatever they set their goals to. They're going to be the leaders, and this is it tickles our the contradiction aspect, contradiction recognition in our brains to think that big oil is going to lead the charge against oil, but that's exactly what's happening. It's not going to happen. It's in the process of happening right now, and I covered that a couple of days ago. Let's go back to the article. The CIC is a physical body representing the action arm of the ESG concept. ESG, of course, coming from everybody from BlackRock and Vanguard to the World Economic Forum, and again, all the Globalist Elite Cabal, environment, social governance. Those three are the keys to their control. In this control and depopulation agenda that the Globalist Elite Cabal is engaged in, that's the key to it. In the CIC, as Brandon Smith notes, is the physical body representing the action arm. If you've got the World Economic Forum as the think tank and recruitment arm, if you've got BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street, and the central banks as the economic arm, the funding, the control of corporations, if you have the Biden-Harris regime and the United Nations and all of the various radical leftists controlling countries across the world, handling the governance arm, all this comes together through ESG. And this is how we get to all the bad things that we've been talking about for years and decades. This is how before 2030 their hope is to have a one world government, a one world economy. And as they noted, without specifically saying one world religion, they made the pitch in that video for a one world religion. Back to the article. The CIC is action arm. It is meant to create incentives and punishments for the business world based on their compliance with the values of globalism and woke socialism, as well as their submission to the climate agenda. I have written about this issue extensively, but my article, What is the Council for Inclusive Capitalism? It's the New World Order, and I'll put a link to that in the show notes, is probably the best overview of the group and their intentions, and it is great. And I did republish that over on my sites as well, with permission, of course. The idea is simple. Bring the majority of corporations into line with the far-left political order. Once this is done, they will force those companies to use their platforms and public exposure to indoctrinate the masses, which is already in process. We've seen this strategy in action over the past several years. Okay, good. Agreed. With many companies producing a steady stream of products, media content, and marketing rife with diversity, equity, and inclusion propaganda, not to mention anti-West and anti-conservative propaganda. These corporations have been so ingrained into the DEI and ESG format that many of them are willing to alienate the majority of their customers and lose vast profits. Bud Light, Target, we've seen it over and over again, and it continues. They don't back off. They double down in many cases. Now, Bud Light, they got hit so hard, and it's a little bit ridiculous. You know, I get it. You know, they became the symbolic representation of patriotic Americans pushing back against the wokeness, and so they got hit maybe 10 times as hard as they maybe should have. I'm not saying that they deserve to not be hit. I'm saying that we put so much effort into boycotting Bud Light that others who maybe were doing worse things than just putting a transgender dude on their can, these other companies sort of got a little bit of a pass, and that hopefully we can change that by exposing them and by getting more people, such as you, to start boycotting. Don't go to Target. I mean, it's that simple. Target is promoting. They're not just promoting. They are trying to force feed an LGBTQIA plus supremacy agenda onto everybody, especially youth. Don't go there. But anyway, I digress. Why would companies choose to join with such an organization? If they're going to be constantly micromanaged in their operations. It may not be presented to them as a choice, but rather an inevitable requirement. And he says it may, and he actually said it might, but he meant it may. It definitely is. Okay, these guys are strong-armed. That's all there is to it. And this is why Elon Musk is such a threat to them, possibly. Now, I've said many times before, I do not trust Elon Musk. I like Elon Musk, okay? I really do, but I don't trust him. Not fully. I think that he might be the plant. He might be the globalist shill. Their last, their ringer. There we go. He's the ringer. He's the one that after, he's going to fight, and then he's going to turn around and try to herd conservatives into the globalist mentality without many even noticing it. That's possible. Okay. Every day it gets I get a little bit more comfortable with him. Of course, this week he went off and told a bunch of CEOs, including Disney, and basically said, go F yourself to all of them. If they want to try to bully him, if they want to try to blackmail him with advertising dollars, blackmail him with money, go F. He flat out told him, go F yourself. And it was shocking to the people there, but it's endearing to people like us. I went ahead. I started advertising on Twitter. I haven't advertised on Twitter for any of my companies since 2012 or something like that. It's been a long time. But yeah, I started advertising on Twitter yesterday after seeing that. So I'm not saying, oh, you got to go out and support this huge billionaire or else we're going to die. I'm just saying, hey, look, I appreciated him. And so there we go. Oh, Elon Musk. But anyway, point is that's why he is so, they don't like him. Either they love him and he's a shill, or they're terrified by him because he can't be controlled. He is ungovernable by the ones that want to govern us. And he's hopefully going to help other people become ungovernable as well. And they don't want that. So I'll just say it. If anything happens to Elon Musk, whatever they say the official story is, that's not the case. I don't care if it's suicide, plane crash, rhinoceros getting loose on his grounds. I don't know. None of it's real. He's not. Anyway, well, God forbid. I wish I hadn't even put that out there as words. But anyway, why would companies choose to join inevitable requirements? Those who get in on the ground floor get the best seats at the cabal's table. Those who join late might be crushed under the weight of an oppressive socialist bureaucracy. Then again, the choice could also be voluntary, with the promise that corporate leaders will be given extensive governance roles after the great reset of capitalism, which the World Economic Forum discusses so often. Keep in mind that the only way such companies would be able to survive after being shunned by the majority of the public is if they join with governments, are handed a state-sponsored monopoly, and are supported by perpetual subsidies. They might even be opening operating under the assumption that as long as they continue to serve the woke religion, they will eventually be rewarded with the too woke to fail status. Mussolini once defined the meeting of corporate power with government power as the original design for fascism. The Council for Inclusive Capitalism is the living, breathing expression of that authoritarian seed. And this article goes on. It's not too long. It's a little long, but it's not too long. You can check it out, of course, Brandon's site, alt-market.us, and you can search for it there. I'll have it on my sites. You can just go to discern.tv/CIC if you want to read it there, as well as catch the replay of this video. I'll put that on there as well. But yeah, crazy stuff. Council for Inclusive Capitalism, pay attention to them. Rothschilds, Rockefellers, Vatican, State Street, Vanguard, BlackRock, central banks, woke governments, they're all in on it. They're all part of this. So don't just put all your anger towards the World Economic Forum or the World Health Organization. These guys are the ones they don't want you to know about. This is why, again, they had their Wikipedia page taken down. They don't want to be known. You might say, oh, but at the end, she said, go to our website and check out our values and sign up and yada, yada, yada. It's not that they don't want to be public. They just don't want to be researched. They want to stay in the shadows. Okay, the World Economic Forum has been around since the 70s. When did you first hear about them? They decided to come out of the shadows, be more public about their stuff way back in, if you weren't watching Alex Jones, I would say the chances are, I say Alex Jones is a general term for conspiracy theorists, starting back around the year 2000, or even earlier than that. But if you weren't listening to Alex Jones or people like him before, chances are you hadn't heard of the World Economic Forum, or at least understood who they were until recent years. Be honest. I mean, they have hit the public sphere extensively just in recent years. Council for Inclusive Capitalism is the exact opposite. Right now, they're staying behind the scenes, but they still control a vast amount of property. They still control a vast amount of, what's the word for it, influence. Yeah, that's the word I'm looking for. They still influence so much, and to ignore them would be a humongous mistake. Censorship has really taken a hit on us. We have been very challenged by companies like YouTube, places where we are not allowed to talk about the things that we talk about. I strongly encourage you, if you're watching this video, right now, I would say the best place to be able to follow us. We're on Brighteon, BitChute. For some reason, we're still on Apple Podcasts, waiting for that ban hammer to come down. But the best way to follow this show, to make sure that you get all of the updates, all of the new videos that pop up, all the live shows that we do, is to go to jdrucker.com/rumble. jdrucker.com/rumble. That will take you to my exclusive Rumble channel, where it's just the stuff that I put up. So it's not mixed in with any other place. You can find my videos over at discern.tv and places like that. But for now, at least, until, God forbid, they go to the dark side. But at least for now, Rumble is doing a very good job of keeping us informed and keeping us on the air. So jdrucker.com/rumble, and that'll take you to my Rumble channel where you can subscribe and get to hear more of this stuff. So God bless you. Well, this next story is awful. I guess it's kind of good because we're getting exposure. We're getting to see what's happening on the other side of the veil, not the spiritual veil. Well, maybe it's spiritual veil, but definitely on the privacy and censorship and PSYOP veil that's been encompassing us for much longer than most of us had any idea was happening. According to this is an article by Cindy Harper over at Reclaim the Net. Exposed! Yay! I love it when a story starts with that word. Cyber Threat Intelligence League's censorship empire, a whistleblower's revelation of covert operations and free speech suppression. According to the article, a whistleblower has come out with information pertaining to a group known as the Cyber Threat Intelligence League, the CTIL. Gosh, where do they come up with these names? It's just, I mean, they really do try to be comic book villains, don't they? Or Bond villains or whatever, just villainous. Made up of a number of government officials, including at least a dozen from the FBI and the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. Wow. All right. Already got the bad guys. Now we got some whistleblowers. These are the good guys. The whistleblowers allowed Michael Schellenberg, Alex Gutentag, and Matt Taibbi access to documents corroborating his claims, and the three presented it to the public in a detailed report. The significance of CTIL is that some observers believe it turned out to be the censorship ground zero that grew to unprecedented size on both sides of the Atlantic, spawning an entire industry dealing with suppressing free speech on anything from Brexit to COVID and the 2020 election. According to the whistleblower, CTIL was essentially prompted into existence with Donald Trump's 2016 election as president and involved representatives of both U.S. and U.K. authorities and private military contractors. Now, let's be clear. 2016 was the catalyst. The election of 2016, there was a secret meeting. There were multiple secret meetings, and this comes from very reliable sources. Multiple secret meetings between the various CEOs of big tech companies. Twitter at the time, not with Elon Musk. Facebook with, of course, Mark Zuckerberg. Google, even Apple was allegedly involved. I cannot confirm that part, but I know that Google for sure, Facebook for sure, Twitter for sure, and they had representatives from the Uniparty swamp. And it wasn't just Democrats. There were Republicans that were involved in these quote-unquote secret meetings. And it was during these meetings that they basically declared, the old worn-out phrase, never again. They were blindsided. They had no idea. They really didn't realize how little power they actually had, because they could not prevent the election of Donald Trump. So they vowed essentially almost immediately after that election, once it was clear that they weren't going to have some magic P-tape pop up or whatever, once they determined Hillary Clinton's probably not going to have him whacked, that'd be a little bit suspicious. They decided that, hey, let's make sure that this never happens again, and that's where the CTIL was born. It's not just, and of course, I shouldn't say that's where it was born. That was one of the catalysts for others to take action. It wasn't like, this isn't, Mark Zuckerberg didn't call his military contractor buddies and say, hey, we need some surveillance here. No, they just said, hey, you guys figure something out, and we're wide open. You tell us what we need to do, and then we'll tell you what we can do, and we'll meet in the middle and prevent Donald Trump from winning re-election. And we'll use this time in between to smear him, to go after him. We'll impeach him at least 2 or 3 times. We're going to tear him down, and we're going to destroy this whole MAGA movement. And that was the plan starting in around the end of 2016. Back to the article. Meanwhile, the overall ambition was to incorporate CTIL into the federal government, thus formalizing and cementing its role. This is why some see this particular set of documented evidence of the early days of the now notorious online censorship era, principally in the US but also in Europe, as even more important than the Twitter or Facebook files. If CTIL was the original disease, then those files can be seen as the symptoms. One of the key and most scandalous points is, at the same time, not surprisingly at all to anyone who's been keeping a close eye on how the censorship is being carried out, although the government, military, and intelligence agencies were the co-founders of CTIL, they quickly realized private entities would have to be brought in. As one document reads, spies and soldiers can act against foreigners abroad, unchecked, but when it comes to the suppression of rights of Americans, quote, the government doesn't have the legal authority, meaning, for example, to directly trample on the First Amendment, so the tech and legacy media industries got involved. This is the key. So they can do pretty much whatever they want. If there's a foreign interference, as they would like to call it, that won't fly. But, and this is a big but, when it comes to Americans, they need help. They still can and have been and continue to do suppression and censorship and basically informational tyranny against American citizens. They just do it through third parties. They do it through Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Google, and all those bad guys in big tech. Now, with Elon Musk coming on board, it seems as if, at least from Twitter's perspective, that era is ending, and perhaps more importantly, the other bad guys involved are being exposed, but nothing's happening with this because legacy media is also involved. And we can sit here, and you're watching this show right now. You're not watching this on ABC News or Fox News or anything like that. You're watching this online because they can't and won't say anything about it through legacy media. And unfortunately, if you're watching this, you are in the small minority. We still live in a society as what do they call it? Unwired, dewired, cut the wire, whatever. As much as we've gone to a purely digital society, there's still far more people who are still hooked in through corporate media. Even if they're allegedly unplugged, they're still going to watch CNN or Fox News. They're still going online to read the New York Times. They might not be having the New York Times delivered to them, but they're still getting a lot of their news from the New York Times, from the Washington Post, from legacy media, or as I like to call it, corporate media. These people that have absolutely positively no interest in exposing any of this stuff. So while we might say, oh, great, reclaimthenet.org and the JD Rucker Show are exposing this, we're going to reach 1/10,000th of the population if we're lucky, if we're able to even go viral. So spread the word. Let people know that this is happening, that it continues to happen, and that the only way that we could ever be able to make it stop is if we can reach a tipping point of awareness. In these times, they always say you don't talk about politics or religion during family gatherings, during the holidays, and yet if you've been to any large enough family gathering, you know that invariably it's been popping up. There might have been a time, maybe 10 years ago, when it was truly forbidden and people really didn't talk about it at family gatherings. But today, even if it's not necessarily just between a few people at a family gathering, the topics do come up. People are interested. People want to know about this stuff. Or there's people on the other side that absolutely positively don't want to know about this stuff. They cover their ears, stick their head in the sand, and pretend like none of it's happening. We need to wake as many people up as possible. We need to get people to be reading this article. I'll put this over at discern.tv/CTIL, or you can find it over at the source, reclaimthenet.org, and you can read the rest of the article. It's fascinating. But the main key here is that this secretive organization is getting exposed, and it's up to me, and it's up to you, and it's up to any freedom-loving patriot to get the word out about this, because you're not going to see this talked about on Sean Hannity or wherever. So it's taboo. They don't expose themselves. Sometimes I get what I consider to be unfair complaints. I talk about the food crisis. I talk about the economic crisis. I talk about these things that are happening in America, happening in the world, that are very bad. And people will come up there and say, oh, you're just trying to sell beef, or you're just trying to sell gold. Folks, it's the other way around, okay? It is absolutely the other way around. I would be talking, if I didn't have any sponsors, if I had $10 million, $10 billion or whatever, and I didn't have to make any money, I would still be talking about these exact same stories. Okay. The reason that I have started a freeze-dried beef company and I'm working with a Christian precious metals company is because these are the stories that I'm talking about, and I want to offer solutions. I didn't go through and just pick out the most lucrative gold company out there. As a matter of fact, they're far from it. Okay, I could make a heck of a lot more money like all these other show hosts by pushing, I'm not going to say which gold companies out there, but these other gold companies, they offer a ton of money. There's a reason why you only see people like me out there promoting Genesis Gold Group. There's only a handful of what I consider to be honorable hosts and whatever who are willing to take less money for the sake of working with companies that aren't going to rip you off, such as Genesis Gold Group. Okay? I mean, again, this is business for the vast majority of unless they're independently wealthy. The vast majority of these show hosts, these websites, these blogs, they're struggling to make money. I don't hold it against them if they go with some of the other guys that are offering, $5,000 in free silver. Did you ever wonder, by the way, how they're able to offer $5,000 in free silver on, like, let's say your $100,000 retirement account, and they're still able to pay big bucks to their sponsors, and they're still able to pay their salespeople, and allegedly they're only making $299 in the service fee. That's all they're making. Everything else, no, you're paying for it. Okay, you're paying for it. I work with Genesis Gold Group because they don't They don't use those shenanigans. They don't try to rip people off. And as far as the beef, I mean, that's a no-brainer. People need food. I don't care if you buy it from me. Buy it from somebody. Get long-term storage food. Stock up. Most Americans only have about 2 weeks supply of food. If the grid goes down, if they lose power, water, everything, if they don't have a water supply nearby, then they're already in trouble. They're not going to last 2 weeks. They're going to last 2 or 3 days at best if they don't have if the faucets get turned off. Point I'm trying to get at is I shouldn't say I don't care where you go. I want you to go to my people. But more importantly, I want you to do whatever it is to make yourself self-sufficient, self-reliant. Do not be dependent on government for anything. Break away as quickly as possible. Get out of the cities. I don't own a real estate company, but I keep telling people, get out of the cities. Get out of the suburbs if you can. Okay? Move away from the places where there's going to be the most shenanigans, we'll call it, when the crap does hit the fan. And it is going to. Okay, the crap is going to hit the fan. I don't know if it's going to be this year, next year, 10 years from now, maybe 100 years from now, but eventually, I don't think it'll be that long. I don't think it'll even be 10 years. But at some point in the near future, I do believe that we are going to see crises that will make COVID and Ukraine and all these other things seem like they were just walks in the park. So no, I don't pick out my stories because of my sponsors. I picked my sponsors because of the stories that I want to talk to you all about. Anyway, that's my little mini rant there. Sorry if I offended you. And when I say I get some, I know most of you do understand this. Most of you know that I have passed on some extraordinarily lucrative sponsors that are pushing items that are meaningless. Okay, and there's this one sponsor. They sell like I forgot who it is, but I mean a lot of people like Ben Shapiro and I think Tim Pool and some people that I actually like and respect, some that I don't like and respect or respect, but some that I actually like and respect. They were pushing this idea of, hey, you go buy a 1 foot by 1 foot plot of land in Scotland and now you're a lord or a lady or a laird or whatever it is. It's like, and the money that they were going to throw at me, it's like, wow, thank you, that would be nice, but no, because that's pointless. I'm not into trying to promote novelty here. No matter how lucrative it is. I don't care. If they had offered me $1 million to do one spot, I wouldn't do it. I just wouldn't. I can't. I'm not going to tell you guys. I'm not going to recommend something that I wouldn't do myself. I buy survival food. Okay? I buy gold and silver, mostly silver. I can't afford gold much yet, but I do supply. I go for precious metals. That's what I do. That's what I think you should do. People say, well, you support MyPillow, and you don't need a pillow. No, but we do need Mike Lindell. MyPillow as a company represents a whole lot more than just pillows. And I'm not just talking about their other products. I'm saying, they represent freedom in America from a corporate perspective. They represent a company, one of the very, very, very few companies out there that actually does oppose wokeness, that actually isn't beholden to ESG requirements. Okay, they're being attacked across the board. So yes, I support them, not because I think that you need pillows, but I think that we as a nation need MyPillow as a company and Mike Lindell as a man. Some of you will say, oh, Mike Lindell's crazy, Mike Lindell's this, Mike Lindell's that. Look, Mike Lindell's heart is for God and America. That's all I need to know. That's all I need to know in order to support him. Do I agree with everything he says or does? No, I do not. Some things he says, some things he does, it's like, man, Mike, what are you doing? Don't do that, But generally speaking, I do support him, and I definitely support his company. And you can always use promo code JDR at checkout if you go to MyPillow and stock up on the MyPillow 2 or robes. I've got the slippers. I got the dog beds. I've got more dog beds than dogs because they like to sleep in different parts of the house. Anyway. Don't ask. So that's all the preface for this next story, which I consider to be, again, is it self-serving because I own a freeze-dried food company to talk about the crisis? Maybe, but I'm not going to mention them. I'm going to talk about the crisis itself because one of the biggest staples when it comes to survival is rice. And according to Tyler Durden over at Zero Hedge, it's getting worse and worse and worse. Article titled, Rice Nears 15-Year High as Global Food Crisis, quote, much worse than 2008. And I've been saying that for a long time. I've been saying since 2021, I've been saying, folks, it's going to get bad and it's going to get worse than bad. We had a hard time, 2008, 2009, into 2010, then they hit us with Obamacare. The economy looked like it was going to struggle forever. It looked, for many people thought that it was going to never get back to where it was. And then, of course, we had 4 years of Donald Trump, and it got back to where it was. And it didn't take 4 years. It got back to where it was and well beyond in less than 3 years. Crazy stuff. If you have good economic policy and fiscal responsibility, and don't about that, because I know I'm going to get some comments about that. I understand, I realize, and I greatly appreciate that Donald Trump, some of his fiscal policies, some of the things that were put into place during his time with his first term, a lot of them weren't very good. Okay, they weren't. Look, I'll call it how it is. I'm not a sycophant. I'm not going to bow down to say that everything Donald Trump does is perfect. It's not. He made some economic mistakes, for sure. But because his sentiment was so strong for business, and because he was able to negotiate such strong trade deals, we did see tremendous prosperity during his time. Once COVID hit, things started changing. Once the lockdown started, things started really changing, and I do blame him for that, at least to some extent. But at least we did get to see a recovery. Now we're in the midst of a scenario, a financial situation with the Biden-Harris regime that is untenable. We cannot survive another term of this. We cannot. Economically speaking, I would argue that there is at least we'll call it a 20% chance that we will have an economic collapse prior to the 2024 election. Okay? I'll say about a 1 in 5 chance. Maybe 1 in 4. We'll see. Anyway, according to this article, rice nears 15-year high as global food crisis much worse than 2008. Rice prices are on the verge of hitting a new 15-year highs as the damage effects of El Niño weather phenomenon across Asia have damaged farmlands, leading to dwindling supplies. Thai white rice, 5% broken, hit $640 per ton this week. These prices are back to levels not seen since 2008. Prices are up over 50% since the start of 2022. Bloomberg spoke with Chukiat Afeswangzi. I think I got that one. I think I said that right. An honorable president of the Thai Rice Exporters Association, who provided new details about the deteriorating conditions for global rice markets. Ofaswangzi said the demand for Thai rice from Brazil and the Philippines continues to rise. He said prices are being pushed up as top producer countries run low on supplies and demand increases elsewhere. And this is a quote from Chukiat. He says, I think it's a he, it might be a she, who knows. We're selling, I guess, it's 2023. I'm supposed to know the gender. I don't. We're selling well now because Vietnam is low on stocks. Yada yada, and it goes into a little bit more technical detail. But the point is this: number one, yes, there's due to drought, due to conditions that made rice more premium. Yes, we are experiencing challenges there, but I think it's worse than that. I think that there is at least a good amount of deliberate, intentional degradation of the food supply chain here in the United States and abroad. They are trying to manufacture a crisis. They are in the process of manufacturing a crisis. And some would argue they already have manufactured a crisis. With food, don't forget, maybe you didn't know this, but with food, things that make it dire and really just dangerous today, oftentimes, depending upon the product, depending on the crop or the meat or the food product itself, we might not actually feel the effects for months, even over a year. A lot of the food that we eat has been, basically ready for consumption for a long, long time. This is one of the reasons why we went with beef and freeze drying. Okay, and we're going to be soon eventually adding bison, and we're looking at all sorts of other products. Expansion is going great if you were curious. But the reason we went with freeze-dried beef is because if you take freeze-dried beef, you cook it. We cook it sous vide. You put it in you freeze-dry it. You put it in a Mylar bag with oxygen absorbers. Okay, you seal it up, and it's good for at least 10 years. USDA says 25 years. So that's what we're looking for. We're not just looking for, hey, stock up on your canned soup, which can last 3, 5, sometimes 7 years. We're looking for further than that. It's imperative that people start taking control of their future food needs. There's going to come a time in the near future, in my humble opinion, I believe there's going to come a time when we will not just be able to hop on Instacart or go run down to Whole Foods and pick up a whole bunch of food. And here's the thing, folks. When the panic starts, it's going to be sudden and it's going to be dangerous. You're not going to want to go to Whole Foods or any other grocery store or convenience store or drugstore. You're not going to want to go there to try to get food because they will turn into bloodbaths. I hate to even, I don't like discussing violence, especially violence that may come in the future. But that's the most likely scenario. In my humble opinion, that is what's going to happen. Once there is even the hint of a crash, people will start getting antsy, and then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. People, we've seen it with banks, we've seen it with grocery stores during the whole COVID thing. People buying 2-year supplies of toilet paper, thinking that, oh my gosh, what am I going to do without toilet paper if I've got to wear a mask? Or I don't know what the mentality there was. But we've seen mild panics already, and that's before any major disasters. What if there are disasters? What if it goes really south? If and when that does, even the hint of that happening will prompt runs to the grocery store, shelves being emptied. Violence can start. You're not going to want to do that. You're going to want to hunker down, be ready to bug in, and that means having enough food and water, preferably enough energy as well, hygiene materials, all the things that you'll need. Now more than ever, people need to focus on preparedness. And that doesn't mean that you have to go, become a doomsday prepper with your bunker in the hills of Montana, though that would be nice. But not all of us have the ability to do that. I don't. I can't do that right now. But you need to at least have some level of preparedness. And here's the thing. I said this before. I'll say it again, I'm sure. I'm not telling you guys this because I want you to, I'm just being nice. This is very self-serving. And not because of trying to get you to buy beef. This is self-serving because we, all of us, need as many Americans as possible to be self-sufficient. Because I don't care how patriotic somebody is, once they have to decide between, bowing down to government and hopping in the breadline or watching their family starve to death, they're going to hop in the breadline. I don't care. They could be the most patriotic, freedom-loving, constitutional conservative in America. But they're not going to let their family die if the solution, the only solution that they've allowed themselves to have, is to hop in a line and get on the government dole. And it's going to happen, folks. I firmly believe that. I'm no prophet. I'm not trying to predict the future here, definitively. But the trajectory that we're on, the machinations of the globalist elite cabal, all of this combines to a very, very ugly future scenario. So get prepared, and get prepared now. I mean, don't wait. It's bad enough that we have rampant illegal alien crossings, that we have essentially open borders that are destroying the nation. But it's actually worse than that, if you could possibly imagine. There was a story that we broke over at thelibertydaily.com. It's been a couple of weeks now. Really started hitting more conservative and even some mainstream sites in over the last couple of weeks about a Brazilian fugitive who was found in Martha's Vineyard, of all places, and or near Martha's Vineyard, I should say. They were searching in Martha's Vineyard, and they actually ended up nabbing him somewhere else. But we had reported, and it had been reported at the time, that this was an illegal alien. Well, it turns out it's not. This Brazilian national came here legally, technically legally, and it's not like he went and traveled, walked thousands of miles and through treacherous terrain and crossed the border and then made his way up, hitchhiked over to Martha's Vineyard. No, this guy applied for a tourist visa after being convicted for raping a 5-year-old child. And we let him in. We let him in. It's like, he just flew right in to New York City. Didn't go through any of the illegal alien, whatever they call it, the caravans or walking. No. He just applied for a visa, tourist visa. Said, hey, I just want to check out the Statue of Liberty, hang out there, see if there's any 5-year-olds there that are being left alone, and they let him in. A story. This update of the story comes from Jenny Terre over at Daily Caller. Brazilian wanted for rape of a minor entered the U.S. on a tourist visa. If that doesn't chap your khakis, I don't know what does. A Brazilian man wanted and convicted for the rape of a child was able to obtain a tourist visa to enter the U.S., Immigration and Customs Enforcement said Thursday. ICE nabbed the 62-year-old fugitive in Tewksbury, Massachusetts on November 28th, the agency said. The fugitive fled Brazil after his conviction, but before his sentencing, and entered the U.S. via New York in April. So he'd already been convicted of raping a child, and he applied for a tourist visa, and it was granted to him. Here's a quote from Todd Lyons, Enforcement and Removal Operations Boston Field Office Director. There's no more repulsive and disturbing crime than the sexual assault of a child. We are proud to have apprehended this convicted rapist and will seek to remove him from the United States so that he cannot prey on the members of our community. The Brazilian national remained in ICE custody pending his removal proceedings, the agency said. The U.S. government typically requires that listen to this. The U.S. government typically requires that applicants seeking visas partake in an interview with an embassy or consulate official, according to the State Department. Criminal activity tied to an applicant may disqualify them from obtaining a visa. May disqualify? What? I'm blown away. I'm seriously blown away. As much as I've studied and tried to become a subject matter expert on illegal immigration, illegal aliens, the border crisis, the various laws that are being subverted. I mean, people say, oh, they're just migrants. No. They're migrants until they enter the United States. Once they enter the United States illegally, they are illegal aliens. They have broken the law. They have stolen our sovereignty. This guy was handed our sovereignty. This guy went through proper channels, applied for a tourist visa, and was given one, despite the fact that he'd already been convicted in Brazil for raping a 5-year-old child. Lyons continued, convicted foreign fugitives are not welcome here. ERO Boston will not relent in our efforts to locate, apprehend, and remove them from our country. Why was he let in the first place? I get it, mistakes happen. But this seems like a pretty huge mistake. This isn't somebody who had parking tickets in Venezuela, okay? This isn't somebody who had been accused of, stealing bananas in Argentina, okay? This is a convicted child rapist who applied for a tourist visa and was granted it by the United States government and allowed to enter, to fly into New York City and to make his way through, apparently, Martha's Vineyard and finally apprehended in Tewksbury, Massachusetts. Folks, we have a huge problem. You know that. But it is bigger than you think. It's not just our lack of a border wall. It's not just our open borders policies. It's not just because Mayorkas and Biden and former border czar Kamala Harris have put out bad policies. The system is broken across the board. And this is coming from a man. I am a legal immigrant. I was not born in the United States. I came here legally as a child. My mother came here legally as an adult. My father was an American in the military. So technically speaking, I'm still, a natural born citizen by the law. But again, I wasn't born here. My mother was legally came here. I just don't understand how this can possibly happen. I'm never at a loss for words. I guess I would even feel a little bit better if he was an illegal alien. At least I could focus on that one problem. But clearly, we have problems with both illegal, and legal immigration. And that should terrify us all. Let's go to station identification and break, and I'll be back. A sharp-eyed viewer of the show. I know, I would say probably most of the audience listens through WWCR shortwave radio early in the morning when we're doing the show, but a sharp-eyed viewer had noticed that the suit that I was wearing for the Jason Nelson interview happened to be the same suit that I wore during the show the day before. And that's because we do pre-record the interviews. I know that the illusion of everything's done live, that I don't want to shatter that for anybody, but because we do the radio show at 5 a.m. in the morning versus 5 a.m. in the evening, which isn't a thing, but because we do the show so early, it's a lot easier to get people to come on as guests when you're not asking them to wake up before the sun comes up. So we pre-record the day before, and yes, I'm going to be doing an interview later today. I will be wearing this suit, but the interview won't air during this show. Today's interview with Jonathan Rose from Genesis Gold Group will be with yesterday's suit. So thank you, sharp-eyed viewer from Brighteon, if I recall where that viewer had called in. Yes, I do. I don't keep swapping back between suits. I just happen to be doing these interviews pre-recorded the day before. So let's go to Jonathan and his enthralling interview. I'll take note. There's when he's talking about the guy from Bricks. Was it? No, I forgot where the guy was from. Anyway, he's telling a story about FedNow, and that part was truly enthralling. So let's get to Jonathan Rose now. Americans today are so concerned about the future. They're concerned about the economy, about the food, about government, about war, about so many different things. Today, the economy being arguably the most imperative one right now because people are struggling. They're struggling to make ends meet. They're struggling to retain their value in their retirement. Today I have a guest who is not only an expert in such topics as gold and silver, but who has an astounding grasp of the economy in general. We are very blessed, pleased, and honored to have Jonathan Rose, co-founder of Genesis Gold Group, joining us today. Jonathan, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing fantastic, JD. Thank you once again for having me back on your show.
It's good to have you. For complete transparency, let's just get the disclaimer out there. This show that you're listening to, that you're watching right now, would not be possible without Genesis Gold Group. Genesis is our primary sponsor. They have put tens of thousands, billions of dollars into this show, as you can tell by my amazing background. And so we are truly, legitimately blessed to have them with us because they do believe in the message. They are an America First company. And as the name implies, they are a faith-driven company. This is Genesis, as in Genesis from the Bible. Now, Jonathan, with the disclaimer out of the way, we look around and we see the gold prices, at least this week. Silver prices have been skyrocketing. And I know a lot of people say, oh, that's a bad thing. That means that they make up reasons, especially if they're into the stock market or whatever. They oh no, that's bad. It's not bad. Okay, if you own gold and silver right now, things are looking good. But I need to know from you, why is this happening? What it prompted this rise in prices that we're seeing recently?
Well, the general consensus in a rally that we've been witnessing right now is really being focused around interest rates, where they're very hawkish that interest rates could come down next year. So how does that have a reflection, or what's the relationship there with gold? Well, generally speaking, or historically, when interest rates have been high, people have shied away from gold because gold doesn't pay a dividend, and people tend to shift more into treasuries or some type of form of treasury bill. So, when you look at the price of gold and people hear that the interest rates could be cut next year, that's actually a bullish sentiment for the price of gold. So there's been a short-term rally here. However, the old textbook analogy of interest rates being higher and gold prices going down, I think somebody really needs to rewrite this textbook, because to me, I don't think that's the case anymore. I mean, we've had a phenomenal run for gold this year. It's up over 14, 15%. 5-year gold is up also over 60%. So those numbers, or the old analogies of inverse relationships, I think they're out the window. I think the reason why we've also seen a rally in gold, and I expect this rally to continue into the next year, is just for simple reasons. One, people are waking up to the fact that the US dollar is losing value year after year. And in fact, a staggering figure I tell people that's almost shocking is since 1933, the US dollar has lost 92% of its purchasing power, which is pretty scary, yet gold's retained that value. Obviously, we're coupling in what's happening internationally with Israel, Russia, Ukraine, so international conflicts. Higher interest rates, as mentioned, trying to curb high inflation. Inflation's very insidious. We don't see it. It's like a little caterpillar on the leaf taking a small bite out of our purchasing power. Now, data came out the other day just saying that inflation's lowering. Well, again, you read these headlines, but it doesn't hit Main Street for quite some time, because investors and people we speak to, they're still struggling. Sometimes people are working 2 jobs, or their wages aren't going up, but the cost of living is. Food's becoming more expensive, gas prices aren't coming down. So a lot of these factors that I'm talking about, and even things like JD central bank digital currencies, which CBDCs, which I'm very vocal about. There's many issues that we have. All of these issues that I'm spitting out here and more, this is called the everything bubble. And top economists are referring to everything and more that can possibly go wrong. So again, this is kind of like spurring the yellow metal to continuing this rally. And I don't think it's going to slow down anytime soon. Obviously, what comes up comes down, the same with equities. Okay, so nothing goes up forever. There will be small corrections, but I think the sentiment here, especially going into 2024, is still very bullish. We don't have a crystal ball, but I believe we have a very strong roadmap. And this roadmap that I'm more than happy to always share and discuss with people is something people should be informed of, because an informed investor is a better investor. And once people do get a stronger grasp and education on what's happening in the economy, what's about to happen with precious metals, they can get a better understanding of how to really diversify their portfolio and move a part of that into physical assets such as gold and silver.
Brilliant. Yeah. And that does make a lot of sense, especially with what I'm hearing, from my people, is you got a lot of concern right now. You touched on so many of them. CBDCs, that's one of the biggest. People are still concerned about ESG. We've seen a shift away from ESG to some extent, but it doesn't seem to be a permanent shift, and we're still seeing woke investments dominating people's retirement accounts. Of course, you've talked about the value of the dollar, and when they say that inflation is coming down, what they're really saying is that inflation isn't going up as much as it was before, which is still inflation, but we can talk about that some of the time. But the thing that intrigued me the most just now is you mentioned that you have a roadmap, and you mentioned 2024. And whenever I talk to financial people, whenever I say, what's it going to happen next year, they always say, there's no way to tell, nobody knows. And I appreciate that, because the people that say, for sure it's going to happen, and gold is going to be worth $7,500 by January of next year, that's when I usually hang up the phone. Where do you stand? You have the roadmap. You obviously keep your finger on the pulse of what's happening to the economy. What does your roadmap tell you about what's coming in 2024?
Well, there's a little saying in the market that's always very true, and it's the trend is your friend. Unfortunately, the trend this time seems to be a plethora of bad news that we don't want to become the trend, but this is just facts that we have to deal with in today's environment. So something that I think is on the forefront, that's something people should really pay attention to, are really bank failures. Obviously, we saw what happened earlier in the year with Silicon Valley Bank, First Republic. Well, now commercial loans are defaulting at such an alarming rate. Now, this is a major issue simply because banks have a lot of bad loans on their books. And in fact, Moody's, who's the credit bureau who really comes out and says how safe these banks are, how viable they are, liquidity-wise, they've just downgraded 7 major US retail banks. So I think we're going to see some more bank failures, and when banks go under, that creates a lot of fear, a lot of panic, and when there's panic and fear, there's sell-offs. So sell-offs would essentially be in the equities market. Now, obviously, there's got to be a button where they kind of freeze the markets when that happens, so people can kind of collect their senses and carry on trading. But I think bank failures is something that people sweep under the rug. And I think we've also been conditioned. We hear these bad news, more bad news, more bad news, and we kind of almost blow it off or ignore it, or it becomes the norm. And there's nothing normal about bad news upon bad news and not expect further repercussions, because let's face it, in the 08 crisis that got missed by many people, a lot of people lost 60, 70, 80, 90% of their wealth, especially people who had retirement accounts. So in terms of having a crystal ball and seeing into the future, obviously it's not an exact science, but we definitely have the economics and fundamentals to kind of be ringing the alarm bells, waving the red flag, and realizing that we need to move to higher grounds to protect ourselves from a tsunami wave of destruction. I always tell people you have health insurance for yourself, insurance for your car. If you are invested in equities, you want to have insurance for your equities. And in my opinion, the safest way to do that is to have an asset of gold and silver. Now, I may add to that, JD, because I was speaking to CBS Market Watch earlier today, and they were asking me, well, how do you get exposure to assets like gold and silver? There's gold ETFs, electronic traded funds. There are gold mining stocks. And there's also physical gold and silver. And they were asking me, which do I prefer? I'm a big believer in owning physical metals, something tangible, something you can hold. If you drop it, it hits your foot, you go, ow. Okay, so that's the tangible aspect of having gold and silver. You have it in your hand. It's never going to disappear. It can't be mass produced. When you have ETFs, electronically traded funds, yes, it's giving you exposure to the market, but you actually don't own the gold. When people want to say, well, you can buy futures contracts in gold, unless you're a trader, you'd want to stay away from that. You don't want to try and become an expert trader if you've never owned a stock before. Very risky. And then when you look at gold mining stocks, not to say that they're bad per se, but you're really investing in the management company, who's on the board of directors, who's the CEO. Are they going to mine any gold out of the ground? Once they find a new mining source, it takes 7 years to excavate the gold and refine it to make it profitable anyway. So there's many variables involved in gold mining stocks and ETFs. So if you want exposure to gold and silver, the safest way and the easiest way is to simply hold on to it. Buy the tangible stuff, whether it's coins, whether it's bars, which kind of also leads me into, how to invest in tangible assets, whether you're holding on to it yourself, or if you have a retirement account, a pension account, such as an IRA or 401k, the IRS lets you roll that over tax-free, and you can put precious metals in an IRA. It's still an IRA, exactly like you have now, except you have actual physical metals that you own in your name. And to me, that's the ultimate safety and security and the ultimate hedge you can really provide for yourself right now in this economic climate.
Well, it's funny that you mention the physical nature of it. I have looked into ETFs. For those who are maybe new to the show or aren't familiar with this story, I was never a fan of gold or silver. Okay, up until right around 2021, in early January, mid-January of 2021, when I started realizing, wow, this is about to go south. I used to be a big fan of, hey, just keep your money in the stock markets. It's never going to crash. Keep your money here or there because, the economy is going to be just fine. Don't worry, Trump's got this. Well, once Trump was gone and we started seeing some of the policies that were being put forth by the Biden-Harris regime, that's where I switched my tune and started looking into gold and silver, and I had vetted out 31 separate companies over the course of about a year and a half, 31 companies that I looked at and started getting the practices for. And I promise you that there's a point to this story, so bear with me. You mentioned the physical aspect of it. Everyone and their dog says, oh yeah, you got physical precious metals. But when I would talk to them, and I'm not going to out any other gold companies, but I'm just going to say that when I talk to some of them, talking about the physical nature of the gold, where is the gold going to be? Can I actually go and touch it? Is it really mine? Are they going to, if at the end of the day, when I'm ready to cash out my retirement account, am I going to get a little certificate that says, hey, congratulations, here's your gold? When I was talking to you the first time, that was a great day, by the way, because that's why the show is even here. When I was talking to you the first time, you walked me through the physical nature of gold through Genesis Gold Group. You walked me through how people could actually, see their gold, even touch their gold, and you explained to me how you make sure that their gold, their physical gold, when it's time to take a distribution or when it's time to receive their retirement, that you can actually have the gold physically sent from their depository to their home. Is that all still accurate, or did I just out you for doing something evil?
No, you hit the nail on the head. Absolutely. The most important thing is that you're in control. And when you have a self-directed IRA, which people may refer to as a gold IRA, but it's called a self-directed IRA because self being in control. So the metals are held in a licensed depository that's backed by the major exchanges, insured by Lloyd's of London for $1 billion. So your metals are safe. Anytime someone wants to take a distribution through an IRA or 401k, they're able to liquidate it. Gold is very liquid, just as liquid as you have cash. Gold is a currency, so people can liquidate it, turn it back into fiat money. But what a lot of times people do, JD, is that they want to take possession of the metal at that time. So we actually have the metals shipped to them as well. So one of the things that I really like, and I think is a huge advantage with a precious metals IRA, is liquidations and distributions, because with a mutual fund, you liquidate it, you take the cash value. That's all you can do. With gold, it gives you options, and I like options, always like options. So that way you can liquidate it, you've got the cash, or you can take possession of the metal itself.
Nice. Anybody who wants to contact Jonathan and learn more about what they're doing, talk to them, somebody who can help to educate them, who can answer their questions honestly, they can go to protectwealthnow.com. That's protectwealthnow.com, and they'll be able to see what Genesis Gold Group can do. I have one more question for you, sir, and I don't know the answer to this. You and I are friends, but we've never actually talked about this. So I'm going to be learning, just as the audience is learning, this very important thing. With your finger to the pulse of the economy, plus with I know that you're constantly watching the news, seeing what's going on, looking for economic indicators, following the trends, as you say. What do you foresee as, and you can do it in any way you want. You can give me a stack list of most risky to least risky, but just tell me some of the things that you're hearing from people that you're talking to and things that you're seeing out there in the financial world, things that we as American citizens should be most concerned about as it pertains to the economy. You mentioned CBDCs. That's a perfect example. What else is there that we should be greatly concerned about going forward?
I'm glad you asked me that, because for a minute, JD, I was fearful you were going to ask me, what's the price of gold going to be on March 24th, 2024? And I was going to be like, really don't know. People always try to nail me down on that. So I never like to give price predictions, but I am bullish on the price of metals. But I think really the kind of the fear index is super high right now. The fear index is a real index that kind of measures people's sentiment. And in terms of sentiment, I have one client that works for Brink's operations. He's very high up. He was one of the architects behind the Fed Now coin, which is all the precursor to the CBDC nonsense. Central bank digital currencies, it's not even a digital currency to me, it's a software. And without going too far down the rabbit hole with you, I think this is going to be absolutely disastrous. Fiat money based on zeros and ones heading towards a cashless society. This is something people are concerned about. They read the stories, it freaks them out. They should be absolutely horrified. So I could go on and on about that, but that's definitely a hot button. Obviously, people are aware that we're printing money. The amount of interest we are paying every day is in the tens of millions of dollars. I always say debt does matter. At some point in time, if you had a credit card and you didn't pay your bill, they cut you off. This is what's going to happen with the US economy, especially with the Congress. You turn on the headlines sometimes, government shutdowns. Do they come up with another number? Oh, I know, let's print more money. So this whole printing more money is only going to you can only kick the can down the road for so long before you stub your toe. So, there's going to be major ramifications. People aren't even talking about this, but I let the cat out the bag early. People need to start talking about, Social Security, money running out for Social Security. Where's that money going to come from? Medicare. So these are a lot of programs that we have to pay for. People are kind of beginning to ask those types of questions. Obviously, government overreach. People don't like government overreach at all. They want privacy, having something tangible that you hold, keeping it in a gun safe somewhere in their own possession. People like this. And obviously, people are also very concerned about the unknown. Now, obviously, we don't have a time machine to go forwards or backwards, but people do remember, and they still have long memories about the 2008 crash, the dot-coms crash, what history has done. Obviously, the younger crowd, I always say they plan for Saturday night, not the future, but people that have remembrance of what happened during, bear markets, market collapses, those people are more concerned because they're now retiring or they're retired. And if a market crash comes along, before, they had the fortitude to kind of hold on to what they have with the mentality that it will come back. And that's what financial advisors always say to you. It will come back. And I have to agree with them. Yes, it will indeed come back, but how long until it comes back, right? So when people say to me, well, I don't have 7 years or 15 years for my portfolio value to come back, they're realizing that they're on this busy freeway, there's congestion ahead. Now's the time to get off onto a clear path and a safe path. And that's what people want for their retirement dollars. They want a safe path. They want to be away from the threat of the US dollar losing more value or collapsing. They want to be away from really an economy that's just fueling inflation, coupled by high interest rates. We haven't really talked much about the real estate market, but I think people out there generally know that it's teeter-tottering. It's not that very healthy right now. So like I mentioned, we have many problems that we're dealing with, from banking to economic. All this uncertainty are definitely kind of driving points that people are really picking up the phone and calling us to say, I have this IRA, I have this 401k. What are my options? Does this plan, TSP, does this qualify? So I think really the main sentiment that we get are people are in what I call discovery mode. And that discovery mode is, how can I plan for the future? And I always make this analogy that you don't wait to buy gold, you buy gold and wait. But it's never been so true, because when we see all these issues hurtling towards us, it's time to kind of stand tall, not bury our heads in the sand and pretend everything's okay, but be proactive and not reactive. And I think as long as you're proactive for 2024 and you understand what your options are, and there are options, folks. So don't think like, everything collapses, we lose everything. There's safety measures that we can do, safeguards that we can take place right now to make sure that the dollars you have invested in different markets have a hedge. And that hedge is very simple. Gold and silver, either physically hold on to it or diversify your retirement accounts and put precious metals in there, such as gold coins and even silver coins and bars. And that's, I'm very a strong advocate for that, and that will never change, JD.
That is some wonderful information. Jonathan Rose from Genesis Gold Group. We'll have you on the show on March 24th, 2024, so that we can finally, because we're not allowed to ask the question today, but on that day we'll be able to ask, Jonathan, what is the price of gold on March 24th, 2024? And you'll look at the information and you'll say it's high. So thank you so much for being on the show today, sir.
Thank you very much for having me. Always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure. I've been a big fan of gold and silver since the Biden regime has taken over. And the research that I've done has told me who I can trust and who I can't trust. And Genesis Gold Group is the company that I trust. You can check them out at protectwealthnow.com. And the reason I want you to do that is because as a Christian company, as a faith-driven company, they will do everything they can, everything in their power to make sure that your wealth, your retirement, your life's savings is protected. In this tumultuous times, it's very easy to it's all done, it's all over, game over, man, as they said in Aliens. Well, it's not for everybody. Some people are going to be very well protected, and they can do that by going to protectwealthnow.com. I could probably talk to Jonathan Rose every single day. The guy is just a wealth of information, plus that British accent. It adds a certain level of class to the show. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. But this next story is very related to what he was saying. Separate. It's funny because he didn't mention debt, and yet here we are. I will note that oftentimes people, including Michael Snyder, who's the author of this article I'm about to discuss, sometimes we get a little bit hyperbolic with our proclamations of doom and gloom, the disasters that are happening. That's not to say that the disasters aren't going to happen. It always seems like every day for, I don't know, the last 2 decades, people said, oh, this is it. This is the big one. The economy is about to collapse. The economy is about to collapse. We've had a lot of Chicken Littles. And Michael Snyder, as brilliant as he has been among those who said, we're on the verge of destruction, especially if you watch YouTube channels. There's a lot of YouTube channels out there where literally every single title for every single video is about how the end is now. It's like, it's over, folks. Pack it up. Game over, man. Game over. This headline is no different, except that once you, and I'll read it, or at least parts of it, I'll read parts of it, but you'll hear that this time it may really be the case. I mean, we really may be on the verge of something really, really bad. And the indicators are perhaps more clear today than they've ever been. And I'll explain why, because the article references a lot with the dot-com boom as well as the 2008 financial crisis. But there's a reason why this one is actually, in my humble opinion, the current situation is actually much worse. But let's start. The title is "The Government Debt Crisis That We Have Been Warned About for Decades is Happening Right Now." So at least he acknowledges that we have been talking about this for a very long time, and yet now is when it's allegedly supposed to be happening, and I think that it really is. From the article, for decades, we were warned that someday our politicians would push things too far. We were warned that someday our national debt would spiral out of control. Servicing that debt would become extremely oppressive due to soaring interest rates. Existing bonds would crash thanks to the shift in interest rates, and foreign sources would start stepping back from buying any new debt that we would be issuing. Unfortunately, that time has arrived. The government debt crisis that we have been warned about is here and is going to be incredibly painful. At this moment, and this moment was just a day or two ago, at this moment, our national debt is sitting at $33,836,693,993,860.35. Cannot forget the 35 cents. It is probably going to hit 34 trillion by the end of the year. So Michael Snyder is anticipating that we'll have an extra at least $164 billion in debt added. I think that his math checks out. As a matter of fact, it'll be probably quite a bit higher than that. It is probably going to hit 34 trillion before the end of the year. It's December. So not much time left. To put this into perspective, When Barack Obama first entered the White House, we were about $10 trillion in debt. 10 trillion when Barack Obama entered. Go figure. We're literally committing national suicide. But for a long time, most Americans didn't really care because we were not experiencing any serious consequences. But now that party is ending. Thanks to rapidly rising interest rates, U.S. Treasury bonds are in a bear market worse than the dot-com bust and almost as bad as 2008. And before I read the clip or the two paragraphs he has here from semaphore.com, I want to explain why this is much more concerning than even the dot-com bust, which was relatively short-lived and didn't have a huge impact on many who weren't rich. But it's also far worse than what happened in 2008. In both of those events, in both of those situations where there was a bear market for U.S. debt, there were triggering events. Obviously, the dot-com bust, that was a bursting bubble where it was just pumped and pumped and pumped and pumped and pumped, and all of a sudden people realized, holy cow, you mean, wait a second, you mean you can't, it was traumatic. I remember those times. Thankfully I wasn't in participating in it, but I remember seeing a lot of companies with a whole lot of money being pumped into them that didn't do anything. It's very similar, by the way, to the green agenda bust that's we're in the process of seeing as these companies are being propped up by Joe Biden's and prior to that by Barack Obama's government funding, and yet they still aren't able to be successful with their green endeavors. That's kind of what was happening back then with the dot-com bust. But when it comes to the 2008 crash, that was obviously created as a result of the housing market crash. And both times that we experienced this bear market, we had clear, definitive, delineated events that prompted the concerns. We don't have that today. You could say COVID, but we should be well into recovery. COVID was the lockdowns really mostly affected 2020 and a little bit into 2021. We should have already been into full-blown recovery by mid-2021. Well, starting recovery and then full-blown recovery through 2022 and 2023, but that hasn't happened. That has not happened. Things have gotten worse and worse and worse across the board. Banks closing, fiscal policy, debt booming, and yet fiscal policy remains radical. No wonder nobody wants to do it. And here's the thing. This is why it's so much more concerning now than before. Since there has been no major hit, no individual event that's caused this bear market, that tells us that if and when we do have a major hit, whether it's rapid de-dollarization, it could be war, it could be natural disaster, major natural disasters, they can have a similar impact, especially if they start impacting industries such as energy or food supply. I mean, there are so many things that could happen. The push for central bank digital currencies is driving this, but I'm not going to get into that discussion today. Jonathan had already mentioned a bit about that anyway. The point is that we went in strong. We were hit by something big during both the dot-com boom and the 2008 collapse. We were hit with something big, but at the time when we were hit, the economy was soaring. Everything was doing very well. Today, the economy is not soaring, and we're already in a bear market. Countries that have reliably purchased our debt are not doing it, which tells us that we're soft right now economically. We are soft. We are sick. It's very similar to if we were about to go into battle. Before you go into battle, like in 2008 or the dot-com bust, we go into financial battle, and we're, thankfully we were strong and ready to go, and we were able to fight our way through it, and it took some time to recover, but we were able to recover. Now we're about to go into battle, and we're already injured. We're already limping. We got the flu, and we got a broken arm, and we got a cast on our leg. We're not ready for battle, and the battle hasn't even started. We're already economically injured. That's what's terrifying. That's why, I'll take Michael Snyder's semi-fear-mongering and say it's probably real. This is not one of those things that you just take for granted. If we can't sell off our debt, we can't prop ourselves up. And that's probably a good thing, by the way, long term. But unfortunately, that long term might not even exist. In other words, this might It's one of those things where, if whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Well, if this doesn't kill us, it'll probably make us stronger if we collapse, but it might kill us. I mean, this could end the United States of America. Let's read the notes from semaphore.com. Elementary economic forces, too much supply and not enough demand, have collided to create the worst stretch for U.S. government bonds since the Civil War. The government keeps borrowing to cover its budget deficit, while once reliable buyers of that debt, both at home and abroad, have pulled back. The result, investors are demanding the steepest yields since 2007. Auctions of fresh bonds that were once routine are now going terribly, and bond portfolios are getting absolutely hammered. The longest dated treasury bonds are in the bear market, worse than the dot-com bust and almost as bad as 2008. And as I say, in 2008, we had a triggering factor. There was a reason for this. There's no reason for what we're experiencing today. We should be in economic recovery. We shouldn't have to be saying, oh, inflation is going down, which is technically to say that inflation, that prices aren't going up as fast as they were a little while ago. It's not a good sign, folks. Anyway, back to the article. A bond crash normally precedes a stock market crash. That is exactly what happened in 2008 and appears to be that same pattern that is being reproduced now. So if you have a lot of money in the stock market, you may want to brace yourself for what is ahead. In the past, we could always rely on China, Japan, and other foreign buyers to keep the party going, but now they are not interested in our bonds. And this also from Semaphore. China and Japan, once reliable buyers of treasury bonds, have been selling them to prop up their weakening currencies. A decade ago, they held more than 22% of U.S. government bonds. Today, it's 7%. The Ukraine war has dampened demand among Eastern European buyers, said Steve Rucciuto, the chief U.S. economist at Mizuho. Increasing U.S. oil production means fewer petrodollars in the Middle East to be reinvested through the Treasury market. U.S. banks, too, are stepping back. And you'll know what Snyder said as far as getting out of the stock market. I know I just had Jonathan Rose in there. I don't want to beleaguer the point. But folks, if your retirement is stuck in an IRA or a 401k or whatever government retirement account, and it's reliant on the stock market to keep it growing or not, maybe it is really time to consider visiting jdrgold.com and seeing what Genesis Gold Group can do to get your retirement backed by physical precious metals instead of paper stocks. Back to the article. I certainly can't blame our banks for stepping back from buying more bonds. Thanks to the dramatic shift in interest rates that we have witnessed, they are sitting on hundreds of billions of dollars in unrealized losses. That, too, is a ticking time bomb. So who is going to buy our debt in 2024 and beyond? That's a good question. And servicing the debt that we've already accumulated is becoming a major problem. During the last year, federal government had to spend 1/5 of all the money collected just on debt interest. 1/5. This according to Zero Hedge. The U.S. federal government has borrowed so much money that over the past year, it has had to spend 1/5 of all the money it collected just on debt interest, which came to almost $880 billion. Americans paid some $450 billion less in income taxes for the year, trapping the government in the pincers of a fiscal crunch. The country teeters on the brink of a debt spiral that could devolve into a fiscal crisis or hyperinflation. Several economists have told the Epoch Times. The problem is serious because, and there's a quote from Steve Hanke, a professor of applied economics at Johns Hopkins University. The problem is serious because any way you cut it, taxpayers are paying interest on the mountain of debt that has been accumulated. In short, they're paying something for nothing. Shocking. In 2024, the U.S. government will spend well over $1 trillion just in interest on the national debt. That wasn't supposed to happen until 2030. It's accelerated. Again, I cannot stress enough. Things have gotten worse instead of better. And by design, if throw on your tinfoil hat if you need. But I don't think this isn't a thing where, oh, the Biden-Harris regime is failing. No, they're not. No, they're not. They're accomplishing the goals that they set forth to accomplish. They wanted open borders and the flood of illegal aliens into our nation, going just as planned. They wanted wars and wars and wars and wars. Yep, going just as planned. They wanted division. They claim unity, but they do everything they possibly can to divide us. They do everything within their power to make people hate you, to make people hate me, and to make us hate them. Mission accomplished. So don't tell me that the Biden-Harris regime is failing. They have been extraordinarily successful at achieving their goals, and one of those goals is to tank the U.S. economy. They're in process now, and they're being very successful at that. This is about the destruction of the United States of America. You can't fail as hard as they've failed without doing it intentionally. Okay? If you take a multiple choice test with 100 answers on there, okay? 100 questions. You got 4 choices. If you were to just go randomly, go pick BC, 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 you'll get probably 20%, 25%. I don't know what the numbers are, but you'll get a certain percentage right. That's with not knowing what you're doing. To be able to fail at literally all 100, that means that you have to know the answers, and you have to intentionally pick the wrong ones. Stupidity cannot allow you to get 100 out of 100 questions wrong. Only somebody who is extremely knowledgeable and who has a plan in place to fail, to get a 0 score, they have to know what the correct answers are, and they have to do the opposite. That's what the Joe Biden and Kamala Harris regime are doing, and it's not by their will necessarily. They're just puppets. They are puppets of the Globalist Elite Cabal, as is the Uniparty swamp, as is the deep state. Keep hammering this point every show. I'm like a broken record. Well, maybe it's time that we break some more records. Maybe it's time that we continue to reiterate over and over and over and over again the truth, the facts, the reality of this world. And the reality that we're facing right now with the Biden-Harris regime is that they are trying to destroy us. Okay? Did the Obama regime do the same thing? Yes. Yes, they did. He said, yes, we can, and yes, they did. They planted the seeds. Okay? If the roles were reversed, if Joe Biden was president in 2008 and Barack Obama was ushered into office in 2020, then Joe Biden would have planted the seeds and Barack Obama would have gone for the kill. And what happened with Hillary Clinton in 2016 had Trump not shocked everybody, including the globalist elite cabal. They've had this plan for a long time. They needed somebody to go in there to start spreading cultural Marxism, to start planting the seeds for division, planting the seeds, such as Obamacare, for economic collapse, to start making American exceptionalism something to be shunned rather than embraced, to start saying that unity is a bad thing, to start saying that equality is bad but equity is good, that forced diversity is the only possible solution, and that diversity has to favor anybody other than straight white males. These are all seeds planted by the Obama regime and now culminating in what we're seeing with the Biden-Harris regime, which is basically, let's face it, this is Obama's third term. Okay? This is Obama's third term. And this is when he gets to strike the fatal blow to the United States of America if we don't stop him. And at this stage, I would almost say it's going to take God. I wouldn't almost say, I will say it. We can't stop this on our own. Too much damage has been done. If God deems that America is allowed to continue, then we will. There's nothing we could do to break it. There's nothing Obama could do, or Joe Biden or anybody else could do to break that if that is what God's will demands. But if things are left the way that they're heading, the trajectory that we're on, we can't fix this by ourselves. Not at least in the short term. I'm not saying that it's over, game over, give up. I'm saying keep fighting the good fight. We don't know if we'll be used to correct this. And if we can't correct it, then we'll have to just head in the same direction and rebuild. It's the way that I look at it. This is why when people ask me, are we in the end times or not? Is there going to be, pre-trib rapture, post-trib rapture, no rapture, mid-wrath, whatever, pre-wrath, mid-trib, whatever, all these, I don't care. I have my perspectives, but nothing changes as far as what I am supposed to do, as far as what I believe you are supposed to do. We spread the gospel, we fight the good fight. Everything else is above our pay grade, and we react as it's happening. But that doesn't mean that, if we are in the end times, then that means we gotta give up, or whatever. I don't tell anybody go sell all your stuff and go live in a cave. Don't drink the Kool-Aid. Just keep fighting. Keep fighting. That's what we're supposed to do. Anyway, I didn't mean to turn this economic collapse discussion into a end times biblical Obama conspiracy, but hey, you just go with the flow, see where it takes you, right? Day of reckoning has arrived, and it is just a matter of time before the entire system comes crashing down like a house of cards. This isn't going to be just another financial crisis, as James Rickards has aptly noted, that what we will soon experience will be qualitatively different from anything that we have ever experienced before. And this is a quote from Rickards. The next financial crisis will not be merely a bigger version of 1998 and 2008 crises. It will be qualitatively different. It will encompass multiple asset classes on a global scale. It will exhibit inflation not seen since the 1970s, insolvency not seen since the 1930s, and an exchange shutdown not seen since 1914. State power will be summoned to contain panic, which is, again, I keep saying it over and over again. This is why get your food, get your water, get your ammunition, get your gold and silver, get out of the city, get out of the suburbs, get off the grid, do everything you can. And we can all do something. Okay? Some of us are stuck. Okay, I am stuck. I can't be away from certain medical facilities because of something that has to do with my family. So I can't. I would love to be in a homestead bunker in Montana right now, but I can't. I'm not going to fret over it. I'm just going to do what I can to prepare otherwise. And maybe you can't. Maybe you can't leave family. Maybe you can't leave friends. Maybe you don't have the money. Maybe you don't have whatever. Okay? I ask you this. Do you have Netflix? Okay, well, cancel it. You don't need it. Cancel everything that you don't need. Get solidified now. Right now. Don't wait. Don't wait till next week. Get ready because things are looking bad. And here's the thing. If things don't go south, praise God. Don't be like, I got prepared, I moved out, and nothing happened, and now I'm mad at Rucker. Folks, you shouldn't hope that thing. It's one thing that I dislike about certain prepper mentalities. It's when, there's this one gentleman I know, okay, and it's, oddly enough, he lives in a homestead in Montana. I'm not getting it from him. It just so happens that he does. Anyway, so his attitude is, because I wanted to have him on the show to talk about this stuff. He's like, I don't want to help anybody. I don't want anybody to. I hope that you all basically suffer for not being smart like me. I put in the effort. Why should I help anybody else? And that pisses me off. I don't talk to him anymore because of that attitude. The attitude of, hey, once I got myself secure and I'm off the grid and this, that, or the other, that I don't need anybody else. That's wrong. It's just wrong. Whether it's to prevent things from going bad, or to rebuild after they do go bad, we're going to need allies. That's why I go against the standard prepper mentality of don't tell anybody about your preps. I don't go into specifics, but I do make sure that everybody knows because I'm trying to encourage them to do the same thing. I want them to know that I believe things are going to go south at some point in the near future. I want them to know that I believe that they need to get out of the city if they can. I want them to know that they need food, water, ammunition, medicines, gold, silver, everything they can need. They need to try to get it as quickly as possible. I don't know if things are going to go south tomorrow or the month after or the year after or the decade after. I don't know. Maybe they never will go south, but it certainly seems like they will. It certainly seems like without God intervening, that there's nothing we can do. We can vote Trump into office, give Republicans full control over the House and Senate, Will it be like 2017 and 2018 all over again? I hope not, God forbid. But we'll see. Or maybe we won't see. Maybe the elections will be stolen. Don't wait for future events to save us. The only thing that can save us is God. So don't look at politics. And that's not to say, oh, well, in that case, let's just vote for Biden. I'm not saying that either. Don't take me out of context. Gosh, I'm ranting too much. Okay, let's get back to the article. Let's finish this up. It's funny because I actually had two or more stories, and I'm probably not going to get to them. What Rickards is describing is a full-blown economic collapse. So what will our society look like once such a scenario unfolds? Already, economic conditions have deteriorated so dramatically that demand on local food banks has risen to unprecedented levels in some cities. This is according to Breitbart. The demand for local food banks is on the rise as soaring prices impact average Americans under President Joe Biden. The increasing demand for food banks demonstrates how soaring inflation driven by Bidenomics negatively impacts lower income families. We are seeing unprecedented demand, this is according to Jackie DiCarlo, chief executive of Manna Food Center, told the Washington Post on Monday. If things, and this is back to Michael Snyder, if things are this bad now, what will we be facing a year or two from now? At this point, there is no escape. All our politicians can do is to keep the party going for as long as possible, as long as they possibly can. They knew that they were destroying our financial futures, and they also knew they couldn't keep borrowing and spending insane amounts of money forever. Of course, nobody can say that we weren't warned. People like me, that being Michael Snyder, have been relentlessly warning about our financial conditions for years, and now I am warning about what is coming in the aftermath of the approaching financial meltdown. Our leaders try to outrun the basic laws of economics for a long time, and for a while they were flying high. But now reality has caught up with them, and we are all going to pay a very bitter price for their crimes. Scary stuff. Scary stuff. But you know what? After saying that everything's going bad, I have to reiterate one thing. And people ask me all the time, they know that I get involved with all this stuff. They know that I read headlines, I read stories, I watch videos, I immerse myself in this for pretty much every waking moment of every day. And I have, as a result, built up a tolerance, so to speak, to the fatigue. But it's not because of anything that I've done. It's because of my belief in Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior and my knowledge of prophecy that tells me I know how the book ends. I know how the story ends. I know that we're going to go through very, very hard times. I'm not looking forward to it. I'm not one of those people that's like, oh man, I can't wait till all these trials and tribulations are making people suffer. That's going to be great. I'm not one of those guys. I don't want it to happen. I wish if I could pray like Daniel and pray for a reprieve, I would do that. Maybe I could. Maybe you could. Maybe we should. Maybe, just maybe, we can somehow recover from this through God's will, through the Holy Spirit. But even if we can't, we still have to push forward. And we do so with the understanding, the love in our hearts of knowing that this is God's plan. Is there going to be suffering? You betcha. Can we make it through? Yes, I think we can. I'm going to go with that as the premise. And if we can't, if it's just too much, then so be it. Again, at the end, if you're a Bible-believing Christian, if you believe in Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, if you repent, then all of this will just be secondary. All your tears will be dried up. All your sadness will be removed. But in the meantime, we still got to fight. So get off your butts. I did this story earlier, and it's funny because I had a video that I was going to play with the story, and I didn't do it. I didn't play the video. So I'm going to go ahead and play that video now. So we're returning back to the whistleblower story, Michael Schellenberger and everybody talking about the this weird league of ultra evil gentlemen, I think is what it's called. Not really, but it might as well be, these Bond villain, super villains that are out there trying to censor us. Former U.S. military, former UK intelligence, Israeli military, and it's a crazy story. Well, our congressman out of Kentucky, Mr. Thomas Massey, he was able to corner one of the bad guys and question her about it, and it's epic. So watch this.
I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Kentucky for 5 minutes.
Thank the chairman. Ms. Troy, you stated in your opening statement that this committee was indulging in fantasy detached from reality, that members of this committee and their witnesses make grand and vague accusations about government censorship, and that we are spreading conspiracy theories about government censorship. Would one of those conspiracy theories be that government-funded agencies were flagging and trying to censor official congressional accounts on social media? Are you denying that that occurred?
I would have no knowledge of that. I'm not aware of that happening.
Well, we're going to make you aware of that right now. Mr. Schellenberger, can you speak to this tweet? I saw that you flagged this in one of your recent articles on Substack. Can you tell us why this tweet brought attention in your article?
Yeah, because that was one of the tweets that that the Virality Project at Stanford Institute Internet Observatory had flagged to Twitter as misinformation, and that I believe it was labeled or censored in some other way.
So it was the Stanford Virality Project, that is funded by the government, is it not?
Yes, it is.
And so their purpose, ostensibly, is to stop misinformation, malinformation, and to flag things they say that might be against the terms of service of the social media companies. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Ms. Troy, is there any reason you think that this should have been flagged?
Depends on whether you're spreading inaccurate information.
Well, it references a study from Israel, a published study from Israel, and the tweet just restates the title of the study. Does it trouble you that
companies to review their policies? It's an internal choice.
Yeah, are you going to sit here and maintain that it's a conspiracy theory that this occurred? We have the documents. Mr. Schellenberger has the documents that showed that this occurred.
Well, then it was flagged for a reason.
What's the reason? Is there ever a good reason to censor a member of Congress? This is my official account. This is not a personal account. This is not a campaign account. This is my communication with my constituents. And by the way, I bring this up not to claim that members of Congress have more right to free speech than the general public. In fact, I don't even think the press or the media has more rights to the First Amendment than the general public. The general public has the same rights that we have. And I bring this up to show, number one, that your testimony is false. But number two, if they can do this to a member of Congress's official account, they can do it to anybody. Mm-hmm. Now I want to move on to the origins of these programs. Mr. Schellenberger, can you tell us about the Cyber Threat Intelligence League? Was this just a group of vigilantes, concerned citizens, or was it in any way connected to the government? And what did they endeavor to do?
Yeah, this was so. First of all, it's a pretty ludicrous founding, which was that this is a group of Israeli, so-called former Israeli intelligence, former British intelligence, also working at Microsoft, and others who basically said, we're going to volunteer our services. These are some of the world's greatest so-called cybersecurity professionals, volunteering their services to multi-billion-dollar hospital and healthcare organizations whose own IT organizations spend millions of dollars a year on cybersecurity, supposedly volunteering this. This was the premise of the whole thing. It then created this third part that I mentioned. They had physical security, cybersecurity, they added cognitive security, and the people that did that were 2 UK and US military contractors. This was one of the most sophisticated disinformation operations that I've ever seen. I've been involved in progressive causes for over 30 years. I've never seen anything so organized, anything that was so focused on a particular goal and that had so many people that came from military and intelligence organizations. It gave me the creeps just reading about it.
And in the documents, is it true that they used their agency seals, FBI, CISA, when they were communicating with each other?
That's right, and the whistleblower provided screenshots of Slack conversations that included officials from DHS, Facebook, and the CTIL League.
So it would be hard for somebody to claim that these folks weren't agents of the government or acting in coordination with the government or using things that they learned in their government. Were they still were some of them still employed by the U.S. government when they were undertaking this?
Yes, Pablo Brewer was working for the U.S. Navy at the time, and the others were many of the others were claiming to be volunteering their time even while working their day jobs for the government.
I thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman.
If there's one thing you can say about Thomas Massie, it's that when he is right, he is very, very right. He's not right all the time. He gets a lot of stuff wrong. But I still think his heart and his ideology are both in the right place. Sometimes maybe he takes it a bit weird, but for the most part, I agree with him. Probably at least 80% of the time. One of my favorites up there when it comes to exposing the bad guys through Congress. So that's it for the show today. Be sure to subscribe on Rumble. Go to jdrucker.com/Rumble. That'll get you subscribed. It's the only place I know for sure that I'll be able to be there, at least for sure now, Lord willing. But with that said, Lord willing, I will be back tomorrow with another episode. But in the meantime, stay strong, stay safe, and God